Hi, I'm Renee Fleming, and I'm with Akila Kadambi and Anne Preven, and I'm very excited for us to be able to hear about their project and the award that they've won with the NeuroArts Blueprint Investigator Awards. So, welcome, and great to see you both.
Thank
Why
you.
don't you start by just telling us about your project?
Yes, our project is examining neural polarization, which is this idea that in people's brains, even when looking at a very similar stimulus, you can get very disparate neural responses, even when people see the same thing. And so this is often applied in the political domain. As you know, as everyone knows, we're kind of in a very uh, massive kind of social and political climate that has not been very positive. And so what they've shown in the past is that when people look at the same stimulus, they've used it often in politics, they look at the same kind of social issue. For example, liberals and conservatives show very disparate neural responses to the same stimulus. So we found it really interesting, and this was, a lot of work that our mentor Marco has done in the past, Marco Iacoboni. And we found it really interesting to see whether music, which is such a therapeutic and a really kind of very important thing in our world, whether that could actually be shown to also show similar neural polarization effects in the brain, and then whether that could actually be used as a tool to also rejuvenate and kind of reintegrate the brain. And so Anne is the music expert, so you should talk more about the music side.
Yeah, so my history, just so you know, is I was a neuroscientist first in college, and then I veered off into the music world. Was in a rock band, became a songwriter. I have personally experienced multiple genres in my life, really integrated into my brain between classical music as a child, pop music as a songwriter, rock music as a band member, and I have found it kind of a really interesting divide between people. I personally am extremely expansive in the genre department. I consider myself genre fluid, but a lot of people are really set in a groove. And genre is interesting for not only its acoustic properties, but because of the cultural and historical context that comes with genre. Country music, for example, comes with like a certain rural, traditions and that kind of thing. Jazz comes with its own historical context and traditions. And so I think the interesting thing about this study is we might be able to show that people that have a real affinity for one genre or another, and maybe a lack of affinity, maybe a strong dislike for another genre. Um, we're hoping to find neural polarization in an fMRI setting. And then the most exciting part about the study to me is the intervention, where we're going to sort of give the country music enthusiast who doesn't like pop music, we're going to give them a little course in pop music and see if we can make them synchronize later in another fMRI session with people who like pop music. So thereby healing the world and solving all the divide that we're dealing with in this moment.
I'm curious of what drew you to this subject. So did you start with the idea of wanting to look at polarization, or did you know you were going to do a music based study, and then you thought about genre and polarization in the brain?
Yeah, Marco sent a lot of studies to both of us when we were first talking about what to study exactly. We wanted to do music in the brain, and Marco's been very interested in empathy, and he's sort of I think he's done some incredible studies on empathy. And it's not a long leap from empathy to affinity to genre, and so I think that's how we kind of decided. He sent that study about the political polarization, which I just found so fascinating that they could find that sort of a different way of receiving the same information, same video, same news clip, that their brains would receive it differently and
Right.
show different activity. I thought that was just amazing. And that led us to the idea of trying a music version of that, a musical genre version of that.
So interesting because the basis for that then could kind of color all of the ways that we receive media and news, which is really separate at this point. So tell us a little bit about perhaps the framework, or how in terms of the study, the design, the methodology, how do you plan on doing this?
Yeah, so the study is, as we were saying, it's going to be an fMRI task using functional neuroimaging, and that typically involves, I think probably as everyone here knows, but typically involves you put people into the scanner and you look at brain activity in response to a particular stimulus that is shown in the scanner. Um, and so our plan is basically to have people, because music is a very different kind of, stimulus and construct. And the way that we sort of approach this is that we have people listen to these different genres in the scanner, and we use this method called intersubject synchrony, which, as Anne was mentioning, it's essentially you have people listen to the exact same stimulus, but you look at how synchronized they are when they listen to the stimulus, how synchronized their brains are versus how polarized. We have kind of this nice metric we can use from neuroscience to be able to look at neural polarization and neural synchrony. The aim is that when we do the intervention, we expose them to the unfamiliar genre, and they go through kind of a series of like mini interventions with a musicologist who's going to teach them about the genre that they're polarized to. And the hope is that when they're re-exposed to it in the scanner during the intervention period, they show a more kind of positive and synchronized response to that genre. Whether it lasts down the line, like in a few weeks or months, that would be very interesting follow-ups for us to also look at as well.
What ramifications in your minds would this have for our divide?
Well, I mean, it's a very divided world, as we said, and people are entrenched in their bubbles and their ideas about things. And wouldn't it be interesting if we were able to bring people a little closer together, and unentrench them, sort of? And if we find that with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of, education about whether it's the similarities between genres or the historical context of where a genre comes from, if that knowledge makes somebody a little bit more open to something that they previously disliked or did not have an affinity towards, that would be pretty interesting information to have in all kinds of aspects of society, I think.
Well, or your background and what you've learned, that has a huge thing, a huge amount to do with it. I am very excited to hear this. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to say about your study?
I think we're really excited, and
Yeah.
we really appreciate this grant mechanism is so
Oh my God.
incredible. At
Yeah,
least,
we're so excited. Yeah, very grateful. Thank you.
Super.
yes.
Well, thank you. All right,
Thank
Thank
Akila
you.
and Anne.